Cut the tears into the creek, which flows up to the river, to the sea. She said, you are one with me. When you're in harmony, I am free. And flow deep from inside. There's nothing to fear, you don't need to hide. Feel free. Let go and flow with me. She helped me see that sometimes I forget that the connection we share makes perfect harmony. Reminded me of things that I cannot see, and that when I'm in harmony, then the river can flow free. For every action that I do, and every thought that I have, and every step that I take, contributes to the flow of the waters, or to the not flow of the waters. It's like the waters in the womb surrounding the child before its birth. When mother is conscious, and the child can feel that connection, and then when born, return her love. So I acknowledge all the women in the room, from past generations, present elders, and all future daughters to be.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's always a joy and a privilege to listen to Rachel and her music. Now I have the great pleasure also to introduce to you my friend Beatrice Imber, who I met at a workshop. Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to thank Jessie and Heather for inviting me to be here today. And Rachel, that song is very beautiful, very privileged to hear it. I have to say, as I've been sitting here listening to all the beautiful prayers and songs, I feel very humbled to be part of all of you today. And I guess for me last year when I started to write this book, it was almost my own pilgrimage of my own life. I came to a point in my life where I decided that the corporate life was fantastic, but it was time for something much more enriching. So about a year ago, I decided that I would actually tap into my passions. I've always loved to write. Since I was a very young girl, I would write. And my aunt very recently gave me all of these books that I was filling when I was about 5, 6 and 7, all these stories. I had this vivid imagination. And but somewhere along the line, responsibility kicked in, motherhood kicked in, lots of other things kicked in, and I had decided to park those passions. I had left them buried somewhere very deep. And as with most of us, sometimes it takes something a little bit tragic or painful to actually get you to really tap into what you're really meant to do. So about a year ago, I decided that I would pitch my idea for these stories about inspirational women to a publisher, and to my surprise, they really liked it. And so I went on a bit of a search, and of course, you know, the title, The Secret Diaries of Inspirational Women, what I was really trying to tap into was who were these women. It wasn't really about the celebrity or the fame, although some of them that you've seen up there you may have known. It was for me about discovering who they were at home, who were the real women behind the name and the fame. Were they like you? Were they like me? How did they overcome their adversities? How did they overcome their challenges? How did they get to where they got? What were their legacy? Did they teach that to their sons and daughters? So it's very much been, and I use that word pilgrimage for me, it has been almost lessons. I really wanted to go and teach myself again how to be really true to myself. So I decided then to write a letter to all of these women that inspired me. And of course, many people here actually today ask me, you know, how did you pick those particular women? And why those women? You know, because there are so many inspirational women out there. It is very difficult because, you know, you can get it wrong, you can get it right. So I decided just to be true to myself, and I just picked women that inspired me, women that I personally resonated with for a reason or another. So some of the women that you've seen up there, I may just talk a little bit about them as I was asked to. So Maura Kelly is a fairly local name. I see a lot of heads nodding. You know Maura very well. She was invited to come today, but unfortunately it's been a busy week, International Women's Week. She's going to Mount Isa for a talk today. Maura really inspired me at the deepest level, and I'm very proud to call her a friend now. A lot of people in this country know her for being the adopted mother of Krishna and Krishna, the Bangladeshi twins, and of course Ahmed and Emmanuel Kelly, wonderful boys from Iraq. But what really fascinated me about Maura was her life before the children, because she had a life before her kids. And Maura, for those of you that may not know, is a full-time volunteer, has been her whole life. She calls herself a professional beggar because that's what she's done. She spent her whole life begging people for help, for money, to actually bring sick children from all over the world to this country to get them better, and then to send them back to their parents. She founded the Children's First Foundation, but what really was quite amazing for me, that Maura knew from the age of 8 that's what she was going to do. She watched a documentary of Mother Teresa in Calcutta looking after some poor children, and there and then she told her mum and dad, that's what I'm going to do. And at 18 she got on a plane to Calcutta and she worked alongside Mother Teresa and never really looked back. And she's truly an inspirational woman on many levels. Really, for me, she showed me that absolutely anything's possible. You don't have to really have anything, you just have to have that will. All of us can really make a difference in the world. And one of the new ventures that Maura's on at the moment is a new not-for-profit organisation, which I'll talk very briefly about. It's called Global Gardens of Peace. Now, it's a very, very new organisation many of you may not have heard of, but you'll hear a lot of this coming year. And I'm very proud to be one of the founding committee members of that as well. And in 2004, she was in Gaza rescuing some children, and was appalled at the state of the country. And the only place that had any greenery was the Australian War Memorial, which had really thick grass, but the rest of the strip was barren, and the children had nowhere safe and nowhere green to play. So she asked the government officials, of course, as she says, this young blonde girl at the time, they all laughed at her, in the world's most densely populated country, where would they find land? But they never really forgot this. This was in the years when Yasser Arafat was still alive, and fast forward a few years, I think back in 2007, she received a letter with the name Mora's Garden written on it, and the new government, Hamas, the promise that was made was passed on to the new government. And we now have been able to find, and we've been allocated 5,000 square metres of land, big garden over there. So firsthand, one of the wonderful privileges of even writing this book is to be part of this project. So I feel incredibly blessed to be part of that. Some of the other women I'll touch probably a little bit less on, but Maggie Beer, they're still very important, of course. Maggie Beer, a lot of you would know Maggie Beer. I picked her because I just love food. Food has been a big part of my life growing up, and she had a wonderful, nurturing manner about her. But she's also quite an amazing businesswoman. She discovered her passions very late in life, at 32. Now, Maggie never finished school, always had this big regret why did I not finish school. She left when she was 14 because her family actually was bankrupt and she had to go to work. And that was one of her big regrets, but she fell in love with her husband, Colin, first, then fell in love with the countryside. Together they decided to make a pate, and the rest is history, so to speak. And Maggie, very, very nurturing woman, and in the book I call her the nurturer. Jill Hicks, another woman that you may or may not know of. Dr. Jill Hicks is actually an Australian woman, now in Adelaide, has been living in the UK for 20 years. Now, for those of you that don't know Jill, or do know, Jill was actually in the 2005 London bombings in London. She was standing in the same carriage as Jermaine Lindsay, the terrorist bomber, that blew up that carriage. Several hundreds died, many more wounded. She wrote a book called One Unknown. She was actually the last woman, or the last person to be found on the carriage. When she looked down, she had lost her legs. And she talks a lot about things that come to mind when you're in these situations. Not that I can say I can be, but she talked about this male voice saying to her, "Fight, fight, fight for your life." And there was this other voice, a female voice, that was actually very nurturing, saying to her, "Look, maybe it's time to let go." So through this whole journey of her being in this attack, and it took several hours for her to be rescued, there was this constant battle: do I stay? Do I go? And she vowed, at one point she decided that the male voice was the voice that she would follow, and she vowed that if she was able to be rescued, she would actually really change her life. And she did just that. She was rescued. She died several times that day. She was almost proclaimed dead on the table in the hospital. And it was actually a couple of members of the team that said, "Look, let's just go for another 30 seconds. Actually, 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And it was actually just in the last 30 seconds that she came to. So Jill talks a lot about how 30 seconds can really make a difference to all of us, at any point in life, and she talks about really living, really grabbing life by the hands and really living it every moment of the day, because you really don't know what's around the corner tomorrow. Very inspiring woman. She went on to found another foundation called Mad for Peace, where she's replicated the terrorist cells, I suppose. She calls them peace cells,